Trump said something last week that barely made the front pages. He said he would be honored to meet the Ayatollah. Honored, not willing, not open to, honored. That is not the language you use about an enemy. That is the language you use about someone you respect. Someone whose contribution you are acknowledging. Someone whose work in some way that perhaps cannot be stated openly you value. Think about who is saying this. A man who in his first term tore up the Iran nuclear deal, imposed the most crippling sanctions regime in modern history, and ordered the assassination of Iran's most senior military commander, Qasem Soleimani, at Baghdad airport. A man who spent years calling Iran the world's #1 sponsor of terrorism, the head of the snake, an existential threat to civilization. That man wants to sit down with the Ayatollah, and he would be honored to do it. Before you accept the framing that this is a dramatic diplomatic breakthrough or evidence of Trump's erratic genius, it is worth asking a different question. What if this is not the beginning of something? What if this is the end? To understand what Trump's statement actually means, you have to understand how this relationship actually started. Not the version in the textbooks, the documented version. In January 1979, 4 men met on a Caribbean island called Guadeloupe. Jimmy Carter, James Callaghan, Helmut Schmidt, Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, the leaders of the United States, Britain, West Germany, and France. Closed doors, no press, no cameras anywhere near it. Iran was on the agenda. The Shah, specifically, America's man in Tehran for 25 years, was finished. The question was not whether he would fall. He was already falling. The question was what came next. After 3 days of talks, the leaders concluded that the Shah's continued presence in Iran would only prolong the crisis. Carter had already told the Shah directly to leave. On the 11th of January 1979, Carter told him to leave promptly. 5 days later, the Shah left Iran for the last time. That same month, Carter sent a general to Tehran, an American general whose name was Robert Hussein. His mission officially was to keep the Iranian military stable. What actually happened is now in the declassified record. On the 11th of February 1979, a gunfire echoed through Tehran. General Abbas Qarabaghi, the chief of staff of the Iranian armed forces, declared the military neutral in the political contest. An army with 500,000 men and some of the most advanced American weaponry on earth. Neutral. They stood down and let it happen. Meanwhile, Khomeini was sitting in a village outside of Paris called Nefoul-le-Château. He had been expelled from Iraq by Saddam Hussein, who no longer wanted the trouble of hosting him. France let him in without a visa. He arrived on the 6th of October 1978. He was a 76-year-old cleric in a borrowed house 40 kilometers west of the Eiffel Tower, and he proceeded to run one of the most consequential revolutions of the 20th century from there. He recorded speeches calling for the overthrow of the Shah from a country home in an affluent French village. Those recordings were put on cassettes and smuggled into Iran. His sermons went out over the BBC's Persian service so reliably that Iranians started calling it Radio Ayatollah. His face was on the cover of Time magazine. He had a press operation that any modern political campaign would envy from a quiet village in France. And then came the part that the Iranian government spent decades furiously denying. In January 1979, Khomeini personally wrote to President Carter's administration and assured them not to worry about their interests in Iran, particularly oil. You will see we are not in any particular animosity with the Americans, he said. There should be no fear about oil. It is not true that we wouldn't sell to the US. The man America spent the next 50 years selling you as the great anti-American revolutionary opened the whole thing by writing to the White House to say he was not a problem. This is not a conspiracy theory. It is based on newly declassified US diplomatic cables published by the BBC in 2016. The documents are in the public record, the cables are cited, the meetings are confirmed. Check the description below for the evidence used in this episode. So why swap a friendly Shah for a screaming cleric? The story looks complicated from inside the narrative. From outside it, the logic is almost crude. A friendly Iran is one arms contract. A hostile Iran is 50 years of arms contracts, plus the bases, plus the Gulf monarchies so terrified of Tehran that they buy American protection without ever questioning the price, plus the wars, plus the fear that justifies the entire architecture. The Iran-Iraq war ran from 1980 to 1988 and killed close to 1 million people. America armed Saddam in public and simultaneously in secret sold missiles to Tehran. Both sides. The same fire worked from both ends. This is not conjecture. It is in the Iran-Contra affair a congressional scandal, a special prosecutor, convictions. It is on the public record. Iran became the permanent justification for the US Fifth Fleet in Bahrain, for the ring of bases around the Gulf, for the $110 billion arms deal Trump signed with Saudi Arabia in 2017, the threat that justified it all walked out of that village in France in 1979, and the bomb. Iran 2 weeks from a nuclear weapon, 30 years of headlines, a clock that never went off, because nobody ever wanted it to. A nuclear Iran ends the threat. The threat is the product. Now look at where we are today. Hamas, Hezbollah leadership, Iran's proxies were largely wiped out through 2024. Tehran barely raised its voice. Think about that for a moment. The groups Iran had spent decades building, funding, and arming as its forward positions in the region are dismantled today, with Iran watching from a distance. If Iran was the impeccable enemy it was sold as, that would be an act of war. It was not treated as one. The Iran-US conflict this year ended in ceasefire talks that are making genuine progress. The bomb talk has gone quiet. Sanctions are beginning to ease around the edges. Gulf money is starting to move towards Tehran rather than away from it, and Trump says he would be honored to meet the Ayatollah. Read it through the lens this series has been building since episode 1, not through the lens of what was announced, but through the lens of what was done. What was done is 50 years of a relationship that both sides needed. One, to move the weapons and hold the bases. The other, to buy its own survival by playing the victim that was written for it in a French village in 1978. The job is apparently finished. The villain is taking a bow, and the man who spent his entire first term tearing up every agreement with Iran is now saying he would be honored to sit across from the Ayatollah. You do not use that word about an enemy. You use it about someone whose service you are acknowledging. The world is complex. The noise is deliberate. The spectrum cuts through it.